Yeah, so exactly. So it's an aspect of operant conditioning, right? So you are doing this behavior with the expectation of some reward, positive reinforcement, right? So gambling is motivated by positive reinforcement. So you did this, you won, you get something for it. That's straight up positive reinforcement. You pulled the lever, you got something. And so as a result of that, you've built a desire to do that behavior through the use of positive reinforcement, right? Now, what we're talking about is maintenance of that behavior. So this has nothing to do with operant conditioning. It has to do with reinforcement schedules, right? So if you pulled the lever every time and you got a quarter every single time you pulled it, not a lot, but you got something every single time you pulled the lever, and you'd been doing that for a year, and then one day you pulled the lever and it didn't give you something, you'd think it was broken, and you might pull it a couple more times before you say, oh, this doesn't work anymore, and you'd quit. But if you had been on a random where you were used to sometimes it didn't reward you, but then there's a chance it's coming, and sometimes it's big, then at that stage you'll keep pulling even when you're not getting rewarded anymore. And so that's reinforcement schedule. We're also talking about positive reinforcement in both cases, but you're talking about how frequently the behavior, pulling the lever, gets rewarded, and that's what keeps you pulling. The random nature of that is what will keep you pulling. If it's a pattern that you can discern, then you know when it's coming and you'll pull it, but then when it stops again and the pattern's broken, you're more likely to quit, right? So if it was every other one and you figured out that pattern, it would be the same. You can do this with dogs. If I reward every repetition and I switch to rewarding every other one, they'll do the in-between repetition, but they do it with less energy because they know nothing's coming. And then they're ready to do the next one. But if I stopped that pattern after creating that pattern one day, then that dog would quit more quickly than a dog that was on random. Because when they're on random, they don't know when it's coming now. It could be the next one. And the longer it goes without them getting rewarded, they're sure, the more convinced they get that the next one has to be it. And that's what creates persistence in those behaviors, right, when we're talking about reinforcement schedules. At this stage, don't over sweat it right now, because what we're looking at right now is the very beginnings of teaching behaviors, right? So we're looking at, but this is something that long term, in a more advanced obedience, when you're hitting spots where we're talking about weaning dogs off rewards, and we never wean, in a reward-based training system, you're never completely free of them. Just like in a pressure-based system, you're never completely free of the tools of pressure. It's not like I correct my dog with the leash for forging and heeling or for not heeling, and then I never need a leash again, right? You're going to have to maintain that and frequently remind the dog of what their job is, regardless of the tool. And it's the same with rewards. If you're doing reward-based training, people will say, hey, when do I get to stop using rewards? Well, never, right? You'll have to have random reinforcement in there. You don't have to reward nearly as much as you do now, like in the beginnings in the teaching phase, but you'll have to have some point where you surprise them and say, look, rewarding's still possible, right? And then they're like, wow, look at that, it sure is. I was going along, I hadn't been rewarded the last 10 times, and bang, suddenly it comes out. And the more surprising, the less they suspect those things, the more persistent the behaviors get, right? So if you set up some circumstance when they know they're gonna get rewarded, that doesn't help you. It's my dog sits at the door. Now with something like that, sitting at the door, the dog is getting something they want frequently. The dog wants to go outside. So I don't have to give my dog a reward for a food reward for sitting at the door, although I may use food to show him how to sit when I first get to the door to help him do it. But once he knows that, he wants to go outside, theoretically. So if he sits at the door and then I let him through, he got something he wanted as a result of that. So maintaining that, there's a reward inherent in that process. But if you're talking about sitting next to you when nothing's going on, then a random sort of reward will always be necessary there, or the use of pressure. And so the other thing is you can then start to say you have to sit, but that doesn't mean that you won't have to reinforce that too. You'll periodically have to remind the dog, hey, remember you have to sit. So it doesn't matter which one you use, you're never free of those tools completely. And if you practice enough, then you hope that the vast majority of times the dog performs the behavior when asked, but you're still going to have to continue to practice them with any skills if you expect to maintain them.